This news update focuses in the ongoing trial of Simon Ekba in Finland, emphasizing that he is likely to win his case against the Nigerian government, which accused him of inciting violence and having ties to terrorism. Simon Ekba is facing accusations in a Finnish court involving incitement to violence with terrorist intent and alleged involvement in a terrorist group. Some critics claims that the charges are baseless, politically motivated, and brought against Simon Ekba by the Nigerian government, which allegedly misled the Finnish authorities with false information. During his second court appearance, Simon Ekba vigorously defended himself and his advocacy, but there was not enough time to complete his testimony. In court, Simon Ekba described his background, how he moved to Finland in 2007 as an athlete, and later became involved in the Biafrans struggle, especially from 2019 after he helped a group of 200 widows in Nigeria. He emotionally recounted that 3 of those widows were murdered, which deeply affected him due to losing his own mother at 3 months old. These personal losses motivated him to advocate for Biafran freedom. He explained that his social media posts showing violent incidents and killings in Nigeria were meant to expose the truth and attract international attention, not to incite crime or promote terrorism. Simon Ekba said his media content, including frequent live videos and social media posts, aimed to document human rights abuses ignored by mainstream media and the international community. However, a critic have criticizes both the Finnish media and prosecutors for misunderstanding or misrepresenting Biafra, claiming their portrayal of Biafran self-determination efforts as criminal is biased and misleading. The critic encouraged Biafrans not to be distracted or divided, affirming that the charges against Simon Ekba, like those against Nnamdi Kanu, are ultimately an attack on all freedom-seeking Biafrans. Simon Ekba explained that most of the information he shared came from local sources and victims on the ground in Biafra land who sent him videos and reports to publicize their plight because they lacked large platforms or feared losing their social media accounts. He emphasized that his role was to amplify these voices, not incite violence, and that his wide international audience made him a preferred channel for such information. He denied the prosecutor's claim that he gave direct instructions to Biafrans or incited them. Instead, he argued that he merely shared testimonies from oppressed people. He also clarified that others, including professors and local officials, did not share the content themselves due to fear or lack of a public platform. Simon Ekba revealed he had lost multiple YouTube channels with tens of thousands of followers due to the sensitive content shared. He said, "This repeated loss shows the risks he faces, which others without such resilience or audience avoid by sending him the information instead of posting it themselves." He described his role as Prime Minister of the Biafra government in exile as ceremonial, since Biafra is not yet an independent state. He criticized the Nigerian media for misrepresenting his position and falsely claiming he denied his involvement with Biafra or called himself merely a content creator. Supporters argued that the prosecution against Simon Ekba in Finland is baseless and politically motivated. They claimed the real target is not just him, but the Biafran people, aiming to weaken their resolve. They called for prayer, unity, and vigilance, warning against misinformation from faceless social media sources and urging continued support for the Biafra liberation cause. The courtroom in Helsinki was quieter than usual on that rainy morning, but the tension in the air could almost be touched. The case drawing attention across continents had resumed, the ongoing legal battle between Simon Ekba and the Nigerian government, playing out not in Abuja, but inside the well-lit modern halls of a Finnish court. The air was thick with curiosity, concern, and for some, a cautious sense of optimism. After months of speculation, public outcry, and international commentary, Simon Ekba seemed to be edging closer to what many of his supporters hoped would be a victory, not only for him, but for a cause deeply tied to his identity, Biafra. Simon Ekba, a trained lawyer, former athlete, and now the most controversial Biafran figure after Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, was standing before a foreign judiciary, defending not just his personal conduct, but his philosophy, his advocacy, and the pain and memories that brought him to this point. The charges leveled against him by the Finnish authorities, reportedly based on information supplied by the Nigerian government, accused him of inciting violence with terrorist intent and of being involved in a terrorist organization. These were serious allegations, with international implications, especially considering that they involved two sovereign nations and a historically contentious movement. Simon Ekba was not new to controversy. He had become a well-known figure within the Biafran self-determination movement after the arrest and prolonged detention of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. His influence grew rapidly due to his social media presence and frequent live broadcasts, which often attracted thousands of viewers from across the world. From his home in Lahti, Finland, he regularly discussed the plight of the people in southeastern Nigeria, particularly in regions historically identified with Biafra. His supporters believed he filled a vacuum, becoming a voice for the voiceless, especially after Mazi Nnamdi Kanu was taken into custody. In court, Simon Ekba stood composed but passionate as he gave an emotional recount of his background. He spoke of how he left Nigeria in 2007, not as a political refugee or radical thinker, but as an athlete. His dream at the time was purely personal. He wanted to succeed in sports, possibly make his mark in Europe, and create a better life. But life, as he explained, had other plans. It was not until 2019, after he had settled down and become a Finnish citizen, that his heart began to stir towards activism. It all began, he said, when he organized help for 200 widows in Nigeria. That initiative, meant to bring healing and hope, became a turning point. 3 of those widows were later murdered. Simon Ekba said that the horror of their deaths reignited in him the pain of losing his own mother when he was just 3 months old. It was more than grief. It was a fire that reshaped his life's direction. As he stood before the court, Simon Ekba's words were deliberate and intense. He did not deny his involvement in the Biafran movement. Instead, he painted a picture of what had motivated him. He was not, as the charges claimed, a promoter of violence or a member of any terrorist group. Rather, he described himself as a chronicler of human suffering, someone who used his platform to bring global attention to what was being ignored or deliberately hidden. He showed the court examples of the content he shared: graphic videos of killings, reports of extrajudicial actions, images of destruction. He explained that these were not meant to incite terror, but to expose it. These videos, he said, were sent to him by individuals living in Biafra land who had no media voice of their own. Simon Ekba described in detail how information reached him. Local men and women, some too afraid to even have social media accounts, would find ways to get content to him. Their hope was simple: let the world know what is happening here. He did not tell them what to do, he emphasized. He did not incite them to fight. He was simply a bridge, a messenger, someone who carried their stories beyond the Nigerian borders to a global audience that might care. The prosecutor, however, painted a different picture. Their argument rested on the belief that by showing videos of violence, By using strong rhetoric and by frequently criticizing the Nigerian government, Simon Ekba was indirectly encouraging unrest and possibly inspiring violent action. They suggested that he functioned as a digital general of sorts, rallying young people to acts of rebellion. They highlighted the social media engagement on his platforms, his role in the Biafran government in exile, and his association with various Biafran factions. Simon Ekba did not shy away from these claims. He openly acknowledged that he served as the Prime Minister of the Biafra government in exile, but he was quick to clarify that the position was largely ceremonial, as Biafra had not yet become an independent state. He likened his role to that of a symbolic leader, helping to organize thoughts, share information, and keep hope alive among a scattered people. He rejected the notion that he ran a militant organization or issued commands to armed groups. Instead, he framed his work as educational and humanitarian. Though controversial, he argued that it was constitutionally protected speech, particularly in a democratic country like Finland. The courtroom proceedings were far from dry legal exchanges. At one point, Simon Ekba's voice cracked with emotion as he recounted the messages he received from the families of victims, from mothers whose children had disappeared, from villagers who fled in fear of army raids or unknown gunmen. These were not abstract statistics to him. They were real people, often known by name, whose pain shaped his daily routines. Sometimes, he said, he would receive footage so brutal that he could not sleep after watching it. Yet he believed the world had to see it. Simon Ekba also took time to criticize the Finnish media and legal system for what he considered a shallow and misinformed understanding of Biafra. He pointed out that much of the reporting around his case failed to distinguish between peaceful advocacy and criminal conduct. He expressed disappointment that mainstream Finnish journalists often repeated the Nigerian government's narrative without investigating independently. According to him, they ignored the historical context of Biafra, the unaddressed grievances of the Igbo people, and the daily human rights violations occurring in that region. The courtroom also heard from observers and analysts who followed the case closely. One critic, whose identity remained anonymous during the hearing, wrote a public letter condemning both the Finnish prosecutors and their sources. This individual argued that the case against Simon Ekba was not just a legal matter, but a political witch hunt, orchestrated by the Nigerian government in order to silence Biafran advocacy abroad. The letter went viral among the Biafran diaspora, leading to renewed protests outside Nigerian embassies in several European countries. The court adjourned that day before Simon Ekba could finish his full testimony. But what he had said already reverberated far beyond the walls of that Helsinki courtroom. Social media erupted with messages of support. Hashtags trended calling for justice, for transparency, and for an end to what many Biafrans described as international silence in the face of their suffering. Activists in the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, and Germany organized prayer vigils and community town halls to discuss the trial and its implications. In Nigeria, the case drew mixed reactions. Government spokesmen reiterated that they had only provided factual information to their Finnish counterparts and had no hand in how the trial was being conducted. However, opposition figures and civil society groups questioned the government's motives. Some wondered why the same vigor was not applied to cases involving kidnappings, corruption, and internal displacement across northern and central Nigeria. Back in Finland, Simon Ekba remained resolute. He told his legal team that no matter what the court ruled, his conscience was clear. He said that the real trial was not in a Finnish courtroom, but in the hearts of millions of Biafrans who watched every moment with hope. He continued to share carefully worded updates through his team, avoiding anything that could be interpreted as contempt of court, but still reminding his followers to stay focused and united. In private, Simon Ekba admitted to feeling the pressure. The trial had taken a toll on his health, finances, and personal safety. His home was under surveillance, and he had received threats from both sides of the political divide. Yet he remained unshaken in his belief that he was doing the right thing. He said that if telling the truth made him a target, then so be it. But he would not silence himself in the face of injustice. Supporters of Simon Ekba began compiling evidence of what they said were inconsistencies in the charges brought against him. They submitted documentation to international human rights organizations, asking for independent investigations into the allegations. They also produced video testimonies from Nigerians living in the southeastern states who said they sent content to Simon Ekba voluntarily, often out of desperation when no one else would listen. One elderly woman, speaking through a translator, described how soldiers had entered her village and killed her nephew. She said she recorded the aftermath with her phone and sent it to Simon Ekba because she believed he would show the world what had happened. As the next phase of the trial approached, anticipation continued to grow. Many believed that the Finnish court would ultimately rule in Simon Ekba's favor, not because he had powerful allies or legal tricks, but because his story resonated with a deeper truth. The evidence showed that he did not command an army or build bombs. He shared stories. He gave interviews. He cried with mothers. He challenged narratives. And most importantly, he spoke with a conviction that made it difficult for even his critics to question his sincerity. Whatever the outcome of the court case, one thing had already changed. The world now knew the name Simon Ekba, not only as a social media figure or political activist, but as a man who refused to remain silent in the face of what he believed was a historical injustice. His journey from a young athlete in Nigeria to a global voice for Biafra's freedom was filled with struggle, sacrifice, and defiance. And in that courtroom in Finland, he stood not just as a defendant, but as a symbol. A reminder that sometimes, even in exile, one's voice can still echo across continents. As the days unfolded after Simon Ekba's second court appearance in Helsinki, the atmosphere around the trial remained thick with both anticipation and emotion. His supporters, especially those from the Biafran community in Finland, began to organize more frequent gatherings near the court premises, sometimes holding silent vigils and other times chanting songs of freedom in Igbo language. They did not come with weapons, banners, or political threats. They came with candles, placards bearing messages such as, "Let Simon Ekba speak for the oppressed," and photographs of those allegedly killed in Biafra land over the years. Some held up the Biafran flag, not in defiance of Finnish law, but in solemn remembrance of those they believed had died for the same cause Simon Ekba was now being prosecuted for. In Nigeria, the impact of the trial was no less significant. While the state-controlled media made attempts to downplay the proceedings in Finland, independent journalists and local broadcasters began devoting special segments to the case. In Enugu, Aba, Onitsha, and Umuahia, street discussions about Simon Ekba's situation became as common as talks about rising food prices or electricity shortages. His name was whispered in homes, shouted in rallies, and printed on T-shirts by groups claiming to stand for truth and justice. Meanwhile, more revelations continued to emerge from Simon Ekba's defense. His legal team submitted new documents to the court, digital logs, metadata reports, and even transcripts from online sessions, to prove that he had no control over many of the videos that people claimed inspired unrest. They presented evidence showing that the bulk of his posts included disclaimers, consistently urging peaceful observation, prayers, and documentation rather than confrontation. This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.